I had been looking forward to my 30th birthday for months. Not because I'm one of those people who counts candles or throws extravagant parties every year, far from it, but because this year felt different. I had just gotten a big promotion at work, I had moved into my first apartment that felt truly like mine, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally living on my own terms. I wanted my family to see it, to acknowledge it, maybe even be proud of me. But the closer my birthday got, the more I started noticing the little things. Mom suddenly remembered she had so much to do that week, even though last year she had cleared her entire schedule to throw a dinner that wasn't even that important. Dad was busier than usual, or maybe he just acted busier, scrolling endlessly on his phone while pretending to read emails. My little brother Ethan was sneakily cheerful in a way that made me suspicious, like he knew something I didn't. I shrugged it off. I tried to convince myself it wasn't a big deal. After all, we weren't a family that made a huge fuss about birthdays. That's what I kept telling myself, even as the pit in my stomach kept growing. Then came the moment that changed everything. I was scrolling through my feed on social media, casually liking pictures of friends celebrating birthdays, when I saw it. A post from my cousin Samantha. Her birthday celebration, lavish, glittering, and impossibly staged, was happening the same day as mine. And to make it worse, my parents were there, smiling in photos, pouring champagne, acting like this was the most normal thing in the world. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I thought maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe they had meant to do something for me too, I told myself. But deep down, a horrible realization started to creep in. My milestone birthday, the one that I had secretly hoped would finally make me feel seen, was being ignored. Completely. Not a word, not a card, not even a text. I closed my phone and sank onto my bed, my chest tight. I couldn't understand it. I had spent so much time being the good girl, the responsible one, the one who didn't cause trouble, who always helped, who celebrated everyone else. And this is how they treated me? Like I didn't exist? I thought about calling them, confronting them, asking what the hell was going on. But something in me froze. Because deep down, I wasn't just hurt, I was angry. Angry in a way I hadn't felt in years. A slow, burning, I'm gonna make sure they see me kind of anger. And that's when the thought hit me. Maybe I don't need them to celebrate me. Maybe I can do this myself. I didn't know yet what that meant or how I would pull it off, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this birthday go by without being noticed. Not this year, not ever again. But I didn't realize that was just the beginning of the nightmare. The morning of my birthday, I woke up to nothing. No calls, no texts, no messages from my parents, just the sound of my alarm and the quiet of my apartment. I tried to convince myself that maybe they were just waiting to surprise me later, but the empty silence felt heavier than any words could. By mid-morning, the reality hit like a punch to the gut. My phone buzzed with notifications, not from my family, but from friends posting about Samantha's party. The photos were everywhere, sparkling decorations, a towering cake, champagne glasses clinking, my parents at the center of it all, smiling like nothing had changed. I stared at the screen in disbelief. I felt a mix of shock, hurt, and a burning rage that I hadn't felt since I was a teenager, fighting for attention in this same house. I thought about all the birthdays I'd spent quietly, helping others, making sure everyone else felt special. And yet, my milestone, the one that should have mattered, was treated as invisible. Ethan popped into my apartment later that morning, carrying a cup of coffee. He looked nervous, and I knew he had seen the posts, too. "Hey, happy birthday," he mumbled, handing me the cup. "Thanks," I said, my voice tight. "You gonna tell me why Mom and Dad are at Samantha's party instead of acknowledging mine?" He shifted uncomfortably. I don't know. They didn't really say anything." Of course they didn't. It's always Samantha. She's the perfect one. She's beautiful, charming, successful, and apparently my parents love throwing their energy at her instead of me. Ethan avoided my gaze. I'm sorry, Rachel. I didn't want to, make it worse. I shook my head, feeling a mix of frustration and determination. That's when it clicked. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. If they were going to ignore me, if they were going to keep playing favorites, I could do something even better, something they couldn't ignore. The idea hit me suddenly, almost violently. I'll throw my own birthday celebration, and it will be impossible to ignore. It wouldn't just be a small get-together. I wanted something spectacular. Friends, laughter, lights, decorations, the kind of party that looked amazing online, something that would go viral, that everyone would talk about, and that would leave them embarrassed for overlooking me. I sat down and started making a mental list. Who I could invite, what I could do, how I could keep it secret from my parents until the very last minute. My anger was feeling a sense of creativity and energy I hadn't felt in years. I realized that for the first time, I had complete control over how my birthday would go, and I wasn't going to let them ruin it. But even as excitement bubbled in my chest, a tiny voice whispered in the back of my mind, "They're going to try to sabotage this. They won't let it go quietly." And that's when I knew I had to be smarter than them, faster, cleverer, and just bold enough to make them regret ever overlooking me. I didn't know exactly how it would turn out yet, but one thing was certain. I was done being invisible. The moment I decided to take matters into my own hands, I felt a rush of energy I hadn't felt in years. I pulled up my laptop, grabbed a notebook, and started writing down ideas. Everything I could imagine that would make my birthday unforgettable. Lights, decorations, music, food, a cake that would make people stop scrolling on social media. I wanted it to be perfect, but more than that, I wanted it to sting, to make my parents and Samantha see exactly what they were missing. First, I thought about the guest list. Friends, colleagues, people who actually cared about me. People who loved me for who I was, not who my parents wanted me to be. I smiled as I typed names, imagining the look on my parents' faces when they realized I had thrown a party they weren't invited to. Next came the venue. I didn't want it at my apartment. Too small, too easy for word to get out. I needed something bigger, something that could hold the energy I was imagining. I called a few event spaces and finally found one that was available that evening. Perfect. Then I thought about the photos and videos. I wanted it all to be captured, to go online, to go viral in a subtle, organic way. I reached out to a friend who was a talented photographer and asked them to discreetly cover the event. I wanted my parents to see it trending without any way to stop it. As I planned, a mix of excitement and nervousness bubbled in my chest. What if they found out? What if they tried to ruin it? But then I remembered something important. I wasn't asking for their permission anymore. This was my moment, and I was taking it back. Ethan came by that afternoon carrying another cup of coffee, and he noticed the gleam in my eyes. "What are you grinning about?" he asked. "I'm planning my birthday party," I said casually, as if it was no big deal. "You mean your own party? Tonight?" he asked, eyes wide. "Yes," I said, trying to sound calm, "and I want it to be amazing. Better than anything my parents would throw. They've ignored me for the last time, Ethan. I'm not waiting for them to celebrate me. I'm doing it myself." He hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "I love it. I'm in. Whatever you need, I've got your back." That small show of loyalty made me feel stronger, more determined. I had allies now, people who actually cared about me, instead of the image my family wanted to maintain. And that made all the difference. By evening, I had booked the venue, confirmed the guest list, and arranged for the photographer. Decorations, music, catering, it was all coming together. I even created a private social media page, sending subtle invites that would allow the posts to spread quickly once the party started. But even as I was caught up in the excitement, a nagging thought lingered. What if this backfires? What if they come and try to ruin it? But I pushed it aside. Tonight, I wouldn't be invisible. Tonight, I would be seen, celebrated, and unstoppable. Little did I know, the real surprise and the real reckoning was just around the corner. The next morning, I woke up buzzing with adrenaline. Everything was moving quickly now. I had less than a day to make this party perfect, and I wanted every detail to be flawless. I started with my friends, the people I trusted most, and laid out the plan. Okay, everyone, listen, I said, gathering them around in my apartment. I want this to be the best birthday anyone has ever seen. No stress, no drama, no leaks. We're doing this for me, and honestly, it's going to make a certain someone very uncomfortable. They laughed, but I could see the excitement in their eyes. They loved me, and they loved the idea of helping me finally take control. My best friend Sarah immediately started drafting decoration ideas. Another friend, James, offered to handle music and playlists. Even Ethan jumped in, volunteering to manage logistics and run errands. It felt like a secret mission, like we were plotting something bigger than just a birthday. And in a way, we were. This wasn't just about cake and balloons. It was about proving that I didn't need approval from people who had ignored me my entire life. We went through the guest list again, making sure everyone was confirmed. People were arriving from out of town, and a few colleagues who had always quietly admired me were excited to join. I couldn't help smiling at the thought of my parents' faces if they somehow stumbled upon this. By afternoon, we were on a roll. Decorations were prepped, playlists finalized, and the photographer was ready to capture every moment. I even thought about small, subtle touches that would make the party look bigger than it really was. Lights, mirrors, clever angles, every detail mattered. As we worked, I couldn't stop thinking about Samantha. I imagined her smug face if she ever found out. She had spent years being the favorite, the one everyone fawned over. And here I was, quietly building something she could never compete with. It felt satisfying in a way I hadn't expected. Then Ethan leaned in, lowering his voice. You know, they're probably going to notice something's up. They always do. I smirked. Let them. This isn't about them. It's about me. And honestly, the more they notice, the better. By evening, the venue was ready. The lights shimmered perfectly, the music playlist was cued, and the cake was a masterpiece, complete with subtle, elegant decorations and a message that said it all. Happy birthday to me. As I looked around at everything we had accomplished in secrecy, a wave of satisfaction washed over me. I was ready. Tonight, I wouldn't just be seen, I would be celebrated, and everyone who had overlooked me would have to watch. But even as I locked the doors and double-checked the arrangements, a tiny voice in the back of my mind whispered, "They're going to find out, and they're going to ruin this." I pushed it aside. Tonight, I would shine, and nothing and no one would take that away from me. Little did I know, the first hints of chaos were already creeping closer than I expected. The day of the party arrived, and I could hardly sit still. Every detail had been planned, every guest confirmed, every corner of the venue transformed into exactly what I had imagined. The lights twinkled like stars, the music playlist was perfectly timed, and the table for the cake gleamed under the soft glow of the chandeliers. I arrived early, checking decorations, testing the music, making sure nothing would go wrong. I even practiced the little speech I planned to give when the guests arrived. Not a long speech, just enough to thank everyone, to celebrate myself, and maybe, just maybe make a subtle point to my family if they somehow showed up. As the first friends began to trickle in, I felt a mix of nerves and excitement. They all looked stunning, smiling, laughing, and carrying gifts and flowers. It was exactly the kind of energy I had wanted, warm, lively, full of joy, and it belonged entirely to me. Ethan arrived with a few last-minute items, candles, balloons, and a small sound system to ensure the music flowed perfectly. "Everything's looking amazing," he said, grinning. "You really pulled this off." I smiled, feeling a swell of pride. We did this, not them. Us. As more guests arrived, the atmosphere grew electric. Laughter filled the room, friends mingled, selfies were taken, and the photographer discreetly captured every moment. I could hardly believe it. My birthday, my rules, my celebration. No one could overshadow this. Then, almost like a jolt of electricity, I saw the first social media notifications pop up on my phone. Photos from friends who couldn't make it were already tagging me, posting stories, and sharing my celebration. I felt a rush of excitement and a twinge of satisfaction. My parents were going to see this. They couldn't ignore it. And that's when I felt a flicker of fear. What if they did come? What if they tried to ruin it? I glanced at Ethan, who caught my eye and gave me a reassuring nod. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "we've got this." By the time the doors were fully open and the room buzzing with energy, I realized that this was no longer just a party. It was a statement, a declaration that I was done being invisible, done being ignored, and done letting anyone make me feel less than I was. I moved through the crowd, greeting friends, laughing, and feeling the kind of happiness I hadn't felt in years. And then I heard it. The faint sound of voices outside the venue. Not friends, not strangers. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be them? I didn't know yet, but one thing was certain. Tonight would not just be a birthday. It was going to be the moment everything changed. And I had no idea just how much. By the time the party was in full swing, the energy in the room was electric. Friends were laughing, dancing, and taking endless photos. The cake had been cut, drinks were flowing, and the music pulsed through the air like a heartbeat. For the first time in years, I felt completely seen, surrounded by people who actually cared about me, celebrating me for who I was, not for who my family wanted me to be. And then it started. The notifications. At first, it was a few likes and comments on my private social media post, but within minutes, photos from the party had started popping up in friends' stories tagged with my name. Messages poured in. "This looks amazing. Wow, I wish I could be there. Happy birthday, you look incredible." My heart soared. Each notification felt like a small victory, a tiny slap in the face to the family who had ignored me. I couldn't help grinning as I imagined my parents scrolling through their feeds, seeing what they had chosen to ignore. Ethan leaned over, his expression gleeful. "They're gonna see this. They have to. There's no way they can miss it now." I nodded, a little thrill running through me. And they'll have no choice but to notice me. Tonight, they can't pretend I don't exist. As the party continued, I moved through the crowd, laughing and dancing, soaking in every moment. The joy in the room was intoxicating, and for a while, I almost forgot about the family drama entirely. Almost. But then I felt it. A shift. A tiny, subtle tension in the air, as if the universe was holding its breath. I glanced at the entrance and noticed a few people whispering, glancing toward the doorway. My stomach sank as I realized the whispers were about my party being posted online. People were noticing, and soon the notifications would reach them too. It didn't take long.
By mid-evening, my phone buzzed with a flurry of messages and tags. Photos and videos were spreading faster than I could have imagined. Friends outside the party were sharing, liking, commenting. The post had started trending in our small town's community groups. And then the first text from my mom appeared. Just a single line. "What is this?" I stared at it for a moment, a smile slowly spreading across my face. That one text said more than any words could. My parents were finally seeing me, finally realizing that I wasn't invisible. But even as satisfaction surged through me, a tiny part of me shivered. Because if they were noticing now, they might come. And if they came, I had no idea how far this confrontation could go. I glanced around the room at my friends, the lights, the music, the laughter, and I realized tonight everything had changed. But I didn't yet know how explosive that change was about to become. By now, the party was in full swing, and I could barely keep up with the flurry of notifications on my phone. Every few minutes, another friend was tagging me, sharing photos, or posting stories. Comments flooded in. "This looks unreal. You're glowing. Best birthday ever." It was exhilarating, more than I had ever imagined. I felt like the entire world, or at least my little corner of it, was finally acknowledging me. And then it happened. My parents' names appeared in a tag. A friend who had been at the party mentioned seeing them online, and suddenly the notifications changed tone. Messages came in with incredulous emojis. People saying things like, "Is this your cousin's parents? They look shocked." I felt a surge of satisfaction so intense it was almost dizzying. They were seeing it. They were watching me, celebrated and happy, while they had spent the day ignoring me. The realization was delicious. Ethan nudged me. "Look at this," he whispered, holding up his phone. On his screen, I could see a few private messages from family group chats. My parents had started sharing links, probably confused and maybe even a little embarrassed. I couldn't help it. I laughed quietly to myself. For years, they had tried to control the narrative, make Samantha the golden child, and leave me in the shadows. Tonight, the story had changed. But as I glanced at the entrance, a flicker of doubt crept in. A shadow moved near the door. Someone I recognized. My heart thumped. Before I could process it, the whisper started. A few people at the party glanced at their phones and then toward the doorway. I turned, and there they were, Mom and Dad, standing awkwardly just outside, trying to figure out what was happening. Their faces were a mix of shock, anger, and something else, maybe guilt. I swallowed hard, feeling a rush of adrenaline. For the first time, I had the upper hand. I didn't need to explain. I didn't need their approval. I just needed to let them see. And they were seeing. Mom's eyes flicked to the decorations, the friends, the cake. Dad looked flustered, like he hadn't expected this at all. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew Samantha would find out eventually too, and she would be furious that she wasn't the center of attention for once. I felt a thrill, but also a shiver of anticipation. This wasn't just a party anymore. This was a reckoning. I took a deep breath, smiled, and stepped back into the crowd of friends. They didn't need to come inside to see it. They were already losing the battle. The world was watching me now. And I knew, deep down, that this night would be remembered far longer than any party Samantha had ever had. But the most shocking part, the secret betrayals, the hidden resentments, had yet to reveal themselves. The moment finally came when the tension in the air became impossible to ignore. Mom and Dad stepped inside the venue, trying to act casual, but their expressions betrayed them. Shock, irritation, embarrassment, all mixed together. I could feel the energy shift immediately. Mom started, Rachel, what what is all this? I smiled, carefully measured, letting the silence hang for a moment before answering. This, Mom, is my birthday, my celebration, something I've wanted for a long time. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it again, clearly at a loss for words. I could see the panic in their eyes as the photographer quietly captured the moment, friends snapping their own photos on their phones. For once, they weren't in control. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. We didn't know. We thought that you could just ignore me and pretend I don't exist, I said, my voice rising slightly. I've spent years being the good girl, making sure everyone else looked perfect, celebrated, and happy. And every time you made it about Samantha. Well, this time, it's about me. My words hit harder than I expected. Mom's face paled, Dad looked uncomfortable, and even some of my friends shifted, sensing the tension. Samantha, who had called earlier claiming she was busy that night, had no idea this was happening. I smiled privately at the thought of seeing her photos online later. She had always been the golden child, the favorite. Tonight, the spotlight wasn't hers. Mom took a shaky breath. Rachel, you didn't need to make such a scene. Oh, I didn't? I asked. You ignored my milestone birthday. You spent the day celebrating her while pretending mine didn't matter. And now you're shocked because I decided to take control? Dad finally muttered something about overreacting, but I didn't let it stop me. I wanted them to feel the weight of their choices. I wanted them to understand what it was like to watch someone who they tried to overlook shine right in front of them. Ethan stayed close to me, a quiet anchor, and I felt a wave of gratitude for his support. It's my night, I said softly, more than myself than anyone else. And I'm not going to let anyone ruin it. Mom opened her mouth again, then closed it. The room was alive with energy, laughter, and music. And I realized something important. No amounts of guilt or confrontation could overshadow this moment. I had created something beautiful, joyous, and unforgettable. Something entirely mine. But just as I thought the confrontation was reaching its peak, I noticed it. Samantha's name popping up on my social media feed. She had seen the post. She was commenting, tagging, and plotting. I smiled faintly, a mixture of dread and satisfaction. The night wasn't over, and if I thought my family had been dramatic before, I hadn't seen anything yet. It started slowly, almost innocently enough, actually. A few whispered conversations, mom and dad retreating to a corner, arguing softly in low voices I could barely hear. But then as I watched, the cracks started to show. Ethan leaned in, lowering his voice. You know, mom and dad have always been complicated about you, right? I raised my eyebrow. Complicated? That's one word for it. He nodded, hesitating, then said softly, I think part of the reason they ignored your birthday, your big one, they were jealous of you, of what you've accomplished, of how independent you've become. I felt my stomach twist. Jealous? My own parents? After everything I'd done, every sacrifice I've made, every quiet attempt to make the family proud, they were jealous of me? And then it hit me. Samantha. I had always suspected her sweetness wasn't entirely genuine, but now it made sense. She had spent years undermining me, subtly, behind the scenes, making herself look perfect while making me seem small. And my parents, blinded by favoritism, had let it happen. I remembered the little things I brushed off, the compliments that always seemed a little too forced, the casual comparisons, the way my parents' eyes would linger on her accomplishments instead of mine. The truth hit me like a lightning bolt. Everything I had thought I knew about my family, about fairness, about love, about support, was a carefully constructed illusion. They weren't proud of me. They weren't even trying to be. They had been choosing favorites all along. I felt a wave of anger, hurt, and liberation all at once. For years, I had been seeking approval from people who didn't deserve it. And now, standing in the middle of a room filled with friends who genuinely cared, I finally realized that I didn't need their approval at all. Mom finally walked over to me, her face tight with an emotion I couldn't quite read. Rachel, I didn't know it would get like this. I shook my head slowly, my voice calm but firm. You knew exactly what you were doing. You ignored me because it suited you. And Samantha, she's been playing her part perfectly. But tonight, I didn't let any of that define me. I celebrated myself.
Dad looked down, guilt written across his face. But it didn't change anything. I had seen the truth. I had felt the betrayal. And I wasn't letting it hurt me anymore. Even Samantha's first online comments were starting to roll in, thinly veiled jealousy, insults masked as compliments, and the frantic attempt to reclaim attention. But I didn't flinch. I had already won in the ways that mattered. For the first time, I understood. It wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about proving to myself that I was worthy, that I mattered, and that I could celebrate life on my own terms without needing anyone else's validation. And though the evening was far from over, I felt an inner peace that I hadn't known I was capable of. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud or cruel. It's simply living well, being seen, and refusing to be invisible ever again. But the final act, the emotional fallout, and the ultimate resolution was still waiting just beyond the night's horizon. By the time the party began winding down, the energy in the room had shifted. Laughter and music still filled the air, but there was also an undercurrent of tension. Mom and Dad had left quietly, no words, just glances that spoke volumes. Guilt, embarrassment, maybe even a little regret. I didn't feel victorious in a petty way. I felt relieved. Ethan came up to me, handing me a half-empty glass of sparkling water. "You did it," he said quietly. "You didn't just throw a party. You owned it. They can't touch this." I smiled, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I know. And honestly, it feels amazing. For once, it's all about me. For once, I'm not competing with anyone else's expectations. I glanced around the room at my friends still chatting, laughing, and taking photos. These were the people who had always seen me, supported me, and celebrated me for who I was, not for what I did to impress someone else, not for how perfectly I fit into a role someone else wanted me to play. For years, I had wanted my parents to notice me, to celebrate my accomplishments, to be proud of me. But tonight, I realized something important. I didn't need them to validate me. I had everything I needed right here in the people who truly cared. As I sat quietly for a moment, scrolling through social media, I noticed something almost poetic. Samantha's comments, meant to belittle or compete, were falling flat. The community loved my celebration. The energy, the joy, the authenticity.
It all outshined her attempts to reclaim attention. I felt a quiet satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge in a cruel sense. It was about reclaiming my story, my life, and my voice. I had taken what could have been a painful, humiliating day and turned it into a celebration of everything I had worked for, everything I had endured, and everything I had become. Mom and Dad might not fully understand, and maybe some bridges will never be repaired. But for the first time, I felt free. Free from comparison, free from favoritism, and free from the shadow of someone else's perfection. And as I looked at the photos, messages, and memories from that night, I realized something profound. The most important party, the most important celebration, isn't about the cake, the decorations, or even the people. It's about claiming your own worth and refusing to let anyone make you feel invisible ever again. That birthday changed everything. Not for them, not for Samantha, but for me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I truly belonged to myself.